In today's episode of True Reddit Stories, you'll hear a story that seems simple at first, just a mother posting online about her child's teacher. But behind it lies an entire network of silenced children who have been hurt and an education system where adults would rather silence each other than face the truth. From a single social media post to an entire school being dragged into the storm, you'll witness how one mother, without power, without connections, pulled back the mask piece by piece from those who hide behind the name of education. Chapter 1: The New Teacher and the First Words. I still remember the very first day my daughter went to first grade. She wore a little floral dress, carried a backpack bigger than herself, held the lunchbox I'd prepared, and grinned from ear to ear like she was about to discover a whole new world. I used to believe that school was the safest place for a child, second only to a parent's embrace. And I truly believed that those we called teachers were people who loved children unconditionally, just the way we love our own. But I was wrong. It all began with something that seemed so small. She came home one day quieter than usual. I asked if she'd had fun, if she'd made any friends, if her teacher was nice. She nodded, forced a little smile, then hugged her teddy bear without saying anything else. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured maybe she was still feeling shy, still adjusting to a new environment. But over time, it was like a cup with a crack at the bottom, slowly, bit by bit. Everything leaked away until there was nothing left to hold. One afternoon, while I was cooking, I heard her murmuring to herself in her room. I went to check and saw her playing with her dolls, saying teacher said no crying. Teacher said if I tell mommy she won't love me anymore. I froze. I asked her what she had just said, who told her that. She startled, her face turning pale, and shook her head over and over. Nothing, mommy. I was just playing. In that moment, part of me felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to reassure myself it must just be a child's make-believe. Right. A few days later, I went to pick her up early. Standing outside the classroom, I saw her teacher, Ms. Ann, leaning close to my daughter's desk. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. If you make one more mistake, your mom will be really sad. I couldn't be sure I'd heard correctly, but my first instinct was to open the door and walk in. Ms. Ann turned around with a smile as bright as sunshine, gently stroked my daughter's hair, and said, "Hello." She did such a good job on her work today. The feeling was like watching a staged scene. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. When we got home, my daughter asked me, "Mommy, if I do something wrong, will you stop loving me?" I hugged her tightly and told her without hesitation that I would always love her, no matter how many mistakes she made. But inside, I was filled with questions I couldn't answer. She began to grow anxious every time she had to go to school. She woke up earlier than usual, washing her face and hands until they were red. Every morning, she looked at me like she was apologizing for leaving my side. I wondered, was I overreacting? Or was my mother's instinct screaming? Because something was deeply wrong. I started paying more attention. I began jotting down the smallest details, and I had no idea that this was just the first door opening to the nightmare that lay ahead. Chapter 2: The Invisible. Scratch's things escalated faster than I expected. After paying closer attention, I realized my daughter had started changing. Not in the way a child grows and matures, but in the opposite direction, shrinking in on herself. Like a flower scorched by the sun, curling inward to protect itself from harm. She no longer told me stories about school. She no longer came home proudly showing me her drawings or humming songs like before. Instead, she stared blankly out the window or flinched whenever I accidentally raised my voice in the kitchen. One day I dropped a spoon, just a spoon, but she screamed, then burst into tears as if someone had just slapped her. I held her, trying to comfort her for what felt like forever before she calmed down. In between sobs, she whispered, "Teacher gets mad. Teacher gets mad if I drop things. She said if I make mistakes again, I'll be sent away somewhere else. I froze. Sent away somewhere else, who says that to a child? And for what reason? I started asking around with other parents. Many of them also had kids in Miss An's class, but no one said anything negative. One mother even told me Ms. Ann is strict, but she really cares. That's the only way kids will respect her. Respect or fear. I decided to investigate quietly. Every evening I'd slip small questions into conversation. As a teacher happy today? Who sat next to you? Did you get to play during recess? Little by little, my daughter began to talk. She told me Ms. Ann often didn't let her go outside because she hadn't finished her work, that the teacher would sometimes pull her into the hallway, making her stand alone to learn to think before making mistakes, that once Ms. Ann tore her notebook in half, saying, "If you write like this, you might as well not write at all." I bit my lip, trying to keep my composure. I knew I couldn't just storm into the school and cause a scene without proof. My daughter's words would be dismissed as the story of a sensitive child or accused of making things up to avoid responsibility. And the truth was, I had been that child once. I knew exactly how it felt to be labeled like that. I wasn't going to let it happen to my daughter. I bought a small recording pen. I tucked it into an inner pocket of her backpack. I taught her how to switch it on only when teacher talks to you alone. If it's not private, you don't need to turn it on. I knew. I was probably stepping into a battle far bigger than I imagined, but if I didn't do it, who would protect my child? And then, the very first recording nearly made me drop my phone when I played it back. Chapter 3. The first recording. I had braced myself for something bad, but nothing could have truly prepared me for the moment I listened to that first recording. That night, after my daughter had fallen asleep, I quietly took out my phone, put on my headphones, and pressed play. Ms. Ann's voice came through clear as day. "You wrote like this! Do you even have eyes?" I froze. It was nothing like the gentle tone she used when talking to parents. Her voice was sharp, biting like the scrape of a razor blade. Then I heard the screech of a chair dragging across the floor, and a sound like a hand slamming down on the desk. She went on, "How many times have I told you not to erase things carelessly? Do you want to make a fool of yourself in front of the class?" A pause. Then in a tiny, trembling voice, my daughter, I'm sorry, teacher." "Miss, and sorry doesn't make you any better. It just makes people more tired of you. Don't embarrass me by being a student like you." I had to stop the playback, take off my headphones, and breathe. My chest felt tight. My eyes burned, and my hands shook. Not just from anger, but from guilt. I had sent my daughter to school for nearly a month, letting her endure this every single day without having a clue. I hit play again. She kept scolding my child, not yelling, but with words sharper than any shout. Words like useless, slow waste of effort were thrown out as casually as cotton, but I knew each one landed like a slap. What hurt most was that my daughter didn't even try to fight back. She stayed silent. Every now and then I heard the faintest sniffle, like she was trying to hide the fact that she was crying. I couldn't listen anymore. I shut the phone off and buried my face in my hands, crying quietly so she wouldn't hear. The next day I spoke to my husband. At first he didn't believe it, but when I played the recording for him, he went completely still. We sat together thinking, what do we do next? I wanted to go straight to the school administration, but I knew one thing: if we went in with just words, they'd dismiss us. I needed more. Not just one incident. I needed a chain of proof, multiple days, so I kept sending my daughter to school with the recorder. Every day my hands trembled as I opened a new file, and every day what I heard made my blood boil more than the day before. She didn't hit my child. She didn't need to. The cold, cutting words, the way she stripped away, bit by bit, of my daughter's confidence and trust in herself, was worse than any whip or cane. By the third day, I heard something that nearly made me scream. Do you think your mom will believe you? Your mom knows how weak you are. If I say it, she'll agree with me because adults don't like bad kids. I had to sit down. My knees felt like they'd give out. My daughter had been manipulated to believe that even her own mother was on the side of the person hurting her. And that was the moment I knew I could not stay silent for even one more second. Chapter 4. When the adults started avoiding. I walked into the school on Monday morning with a USB drive containing all the recordings from the past week. I didn't make an appointment. I didn't send a polite email. I didn't inform the homeroom teacher beforehand. I went straight to the principal's office and asked to see him. At first, the secretary tried to stop me saying, "The principal is in a meeting." But the moment I said this, she stood up immediately. "I have recorded proof that a teacher has been mentally abusing my child for days. And if this isn't addressed right here and now, I'll let the media and a lawyer take care of it." 10 minutes later, I was sitting in the principal's office. He was polite. Too polite so much that it made me suspicious. He listened to my story, nodding occasionally, offering lines like, "We're very sorry. We will definitely investigate, and this does not reflect the values of our school." Then I handed him the USB. I said, "If you truly want to investigate, then listen to it." I've been listening to it for a week now. He refused to listen right then and there. His reason: "We need the teacher and legal representatives to be present." I forced myself to stay calm because I knew that if I lost control, they would use it as an excuse to dismiss me. I told him, "I'll give you 48 hours. After that, I will send these recordings to every parent in the class and file a formal complaint with the City Department of Education." That was it. I stood up and walked out without waiting for his reply. That afternoon, Ms. Ann called me. Her voice was as sweet as the day we first met, but I could hear the strain in every word. She said, "I'm sorry if there's been any misunderstanding." Misunderstanding, I cut her off immediately. "Which recording are you talking about? The one where you called my child useless, or the one where you said I'd agree with you if you called her stupid silence?" I waited. She couldn't answer. Finally, she muttered, "I really didn't mean. I just wanted the children to try harder." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was disgusting. My child wakes up in the middle of the night from nightmares. She startles whenever she hears someone raise their voice. "Is that the effort you wanted?" I hung up. I didn't need an apology. I needed action. That night, I posted in the parents group for the class. No names, no direct accusations. I simply described the situation, quoted a few lines from the recordings, and asked, "If this were your child, would you stay silent?" The group exploded. Parents who had stayed quiet began messaging me privately. They said their kids were also afraid to go to school, that Ms. Ann had made them stand in the corner as punishment, or called them out in front of the whole class for bad handwriting. One mother even sent me a picture of her son's arm showing marks from being yanked hard. When asked, the boy said, "Teacher pulled me out of class because I was talking." So it wasn't just words. The next morning, I returned to the school, this time with 5 other parents. We demanded an official meeting with the principal, a representative from the Department of Education, and a teachers' union officer. We were no longer just a single, overreacting mother. We were a group of parents with evidence, with witnesses, and with the fury of people who once believed they had entrusted their children to a safe environment. And that was when the school could no longer avoid us. Chapter 5. The Meeting. No one dared to record. I don't know why, but when we walked into that meeting room that day, not a single camera was turned on. No official audio recording was suggested. No technical staff, no prepared minutes. It was obvious they wanted this to be nothing more than an internal discussion, but I'm not stupid. I placed my phone on the table, the screen showing the voice recorder already running. I didn't ask for their permission. I simply said, "Since I'm not sure I can remember everything, I need to record it. As a mother." The principal glanced at the school's lawyer. He gave a small nod, saying nothing. The meeting began. The school's side had only 3 people: the principal, the lawyer, and a woman from the teachers' union who, from the very start to the very end, looked at me as if I were the threat, not a mother protecting her child. Our side's 6 parents sat opposite them, armed with proof. I opened with, "We're not here for apologies. We're here for change." Then I played the recordings one by one, every word Miss Ann had said. The room grew suffocatingly silent. Even the lawyer's breathing became quieter. The recording of my daughter's trembling voice, "I don't understand why you hate me," teacher played. A mother sitting beside me broke into tears. After 10 minutes of silence, the principal finally spoke. "We will review our teaching procedures and retrain the teacher." Retrain? I gave a bitter laugh. Another parent couldn't hold back anymore. "You're going to retrain someone who's harmed more than 5 children, made them so terrified they wet themselves at the sound of the school bell." The question hung in the air. The union representative spoke up for the first time. "I'd like to remind everyone that teachers also have the right to be protected. Ms. Ann may have been under a lot of work pressure." I didn't let her finish. "If she's under pressure, she should take a leave of absence. No one forces her to pour her frustration onto a 7-year-old child. We're not here to sympathize with a bully." The meeting tightened like a drawn bowstring. I opened my laptop and displayed slides of messages from other parents, those who weren't present, describing how their children had also been mentally abused. One father stood up. "If you don't remove Ms. Ann, we will withdraw all of our children from this school, and we will do it publicly." The principal finally understood this was no longer a personal threat. This was collective outrage. And the truth was, what they feared most was public opinion. After 3 tense hours, they agreed to suspend Ms. On pending internal investigation. But I knew very well if I didn't keep pressing, that suspension would just be a paid vacation in disguise. Before leaving, I turned to the principal. "If my child suffers even one more psychological wound from this school, I won't be calling another meeting. I'll be filing a lawsuit." He didn't reply, just gave a slight nod, the kind from someone backed into a corner. That day I went home and held my daughter for a long time. She didn't fully understand what had happened, but her eyes seemed lighter, and for the first time in months she asked me, "Mommy, are we going to school tomorrow?" I squeezed her hand. "Yes, but this time, you're not going alone anymore." Chapter 6. When social media spoke for my child, I never thought I would do it. I'm not the kind of person who likes to put family matters out on the internet. I'd always believed that a good parent is one who handles problems through the right channels, the proper procedures. But after that meeting, I realized something: if I kept trusting their process, then I was teaching my child to stay silent. And I didn't want her to grow up to be someone who swallows her tears every time she's treated badly. So I posted. I didn't use my real name. I just wrote, "My child was made to stand in the sun for 30 minutes because she didn't complete her work the right way. She was called stupid like a dog." I have the full recordings. The principal remained silent. If you've ever been a victim, or if your child is sick with fear because of an adult in the classroom, speak up. I didn't expect it to spread so fast. Within a single night, the post had been shared over 20,000 times. My inbox flooded with messages. Parents from other provinces, from other schools, even from a high school more than 10 years ago. All mentioned the same name, Ms. Ann. One person wrote, "I was her student in 2009. I still remember how she knocked my pen to the floor and told me to lick it if I wanted to keep taking the exam." Another parent messaged privately, "I thought my child was just too sensitive, but now I realize I've been silent for far too long." This pain wasn't new. It's just that no one had dared to speak about it. Within 48 hours, local media began reaching out. A YouTube channel that covers education issues invited me for an interview. I declined to show my face, but I agreed to share the story. I sent them the recordings, and I sent them a video another parent had secretly taken with a smartwatch, Miss yelling into the face of an 8-year-old, "Your parents are stupid." That's why you turned out like this. That footage went trending. The school could no longer stay silent. They held a press conference, and for the first time, they didn't call it a misunderstanding in teaching methods. They called it what it was: verbal abuse threats and emotional harm to students. Ms. Ann was suspended, not placed on leave pending investigation, but actually suspended. But what made my blood run cold was when the media dug deeper and discovered this wasn't the first time she had been accused. There were at least 4 prior cases, every single one resolved internally, which meant they knew. They had known for a long time, and they let it happen. That night, I cried, not from anger, but from the crushing realization that for years, countless children had endured what my daughter went through, and no one had heard them. One parent messaged me at midnight, "Thank you. My daughter no longer flinches when she hears the school bell." She told me, "Now Ms. Ann doesn't yell at us every morning anymore. You did what we didn't dare to do." I looked at my daughter sleeping, her fine hair falling across her cheek. She didn't know that her peaceful sleep that night was the result of a storm I had been willing to unleash for her. And I knew I couldn't stop yet. I couldn't. Because when an adult bullies a child and the whole system chooses to watch the first person to stand up, has to be a mother. Chapter 7: The Price of Speaking Up. 3 days after Ms. Ann was suspended, I got a call from an unknown number. No name saved. I almost didn't answer. My phone had been blowing up for the past 48 hours with reporters, strangers, praise and hate alike. But I picked up. A man's voice, polite, calm. "Hello. My name is Locke, an officer from the Provincial Department of Education. We're aware of the situation, and we'd like to meet with you in person to discuss a few things." I nodded, phone still pressed to my ear, but a prickling instinct had already started in my gut. Why in person? Why not an official letter or a formal email? I asked him directly, "What exactly do you want to discuss?" "If it's about the investigation, I'm happy to provide information, but I'm not comfortable with private meetings." He was silent for a moment, then said something that froze me in place. "Actually, we'd like you to consider taking your post down. It's causing a lot of impact. There are consequences you might not have anticipated." I laughed. Not lightly, not sarcastically, just the kind of laugh you give when you realize you've just been slapped in the face with sugar-coated words. "Consequences for who? The people who've been silencing parents for years." He kept his tone measured, exactly the way a provincial official would. "We're not saying you're wrong, but when things go too far, public opinion becomes hard to control. Ms. Ann still has a family. She has young children. The media right now is pushing things far beyond the core of the matter." I didn't let him finish. "The core of the matter is this: an 8-year-old child was insulted and psychologically tormented. The core is that adults protected each other and left children to be hurt. If you really cared about the core, she would have been dealt with back in 2018. Silence. I heard a faint sigh, then his final remark, "Well, just think about it. The people supporting you today may not stand by you if something else comes to light." I knew that kind of gentle threat. A warning. A reminder that if I kept going, someone would dig into my personal life, twist it, and make me the headline, but no longer as the victim. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. And I added one more line to my original post. "Today, I received a call from someone claiming to be from the Department of Education. They advised me to delete my post, citing unpredictable consequences. I will not do that. And if anything happens to me, please remember I am just a mother protecting her child." That post spread even faster than the first one. An entire wave of parents began sharing old stories. A hashtag was born: "The Phi once stayed silent." And this time, it wasn't just me. A group of volunteer lawyers offered to help me file a formal complaint with the Ministry of Education. A veteran journalist reached out to produce an independent investigative report. And a young city council member sent me a message: "Ms. Ann is just the drop that spilled the cup. The bigger issue is, why are so many people choosing to stay silent? I will raise this in the next council session. That night, I slept beside my daughter. She no longer cried when school was mentioned, but I knew that her peace wasn't free. I had traded away my privacy, my reputation, and even my personal safety just so one child could sit in a classroom without being screamed at by an adult. And I have not regretted it for a single second. Chapter 8. The Truth. Worse than the nightmare. I thought things were finally starting to quiet down. After the second post, after the phone calls, the sugar-coated threats, and the half-hearted compliments buried in the noise of public opinion, I began to feel like I was swimming out of the storm. My daughter had been transferred to a new school, I'd returned to work, and each day I told myself I did the right thing. Everything will be fine. But then the letter arrived. A gray envelope. No sender's name, no postmark. It was just sitting there in my mailbox, wedged between supermarket flyers and the electricity bill. Nothing remarkable except for the scrawled handwriting across the front, for the mother of H. I hesitated for 5 minutes before opening it. Part of me already knew whatever was inside wasn't going to be pleasant. The paper inside wasn't printed. It was handwritten in black ink, the neat, deliberate strokes of an older teacher. I can't stay silent any longer. Ms. An is not the only one. She's simply the last in a long line. Children have been punished to maintain classroom discipline. Parents who spoke up were called in intimidated, then branded as troublemakers. There were teachers who cried in staff meetings after seeing a student's head slammed into the blackboard. But the school said, problem students must be handled differently. My hands trembled as I read, but it wasn't over. I was part of it. I stayed silent. I signed the voluntary resignation papers because I couldn't bear the pressure to be complicit. But now, I'm retired. I'm not afraid anymore. If you need me, I will testify. I have names, dates, proof. At the bottom was a name that made my jaw drop. Miss Tui, my own former homeroom teacher in primary school. The gentle one. The one who cried when our class graduated. I thought she had left the city long ago. No, she was here, and she knew. That night I wrote a new post. No anger, no rallying cries, just a story. About a woman who stayed silent for 20 years because she was afraid. About a school system where teachers' hands were tied if they didn't go along with cruel practices. I didn't mention her name, but I quoted her letter word for word, and I asked, how many more children have to be hurt? How many more adults have to witness it before they feel enough pain to speak up? The post was shared over 30,000 times, and for the first time, something strange happened. Other teachers began to speak. An anonymous young male teacher wrote about being forced to keep quiet when he saw a colleague shouting in the face of a first grader. A preschool teacher shared how she had been transferred for not being tough enough on difficult children. A mother expelled from the Parent-Teacher Association for suggesting teach with love posted a photo of her child's scratched arm from being made to stand facing the wall for 45 minutes. The situation grew so big that a primetime news program invited me on air. I declined. I didn't want to be the center of the story, because I wasn't a hero. I was just a mother who had been too angry to stay silent, but I agreed to let them air an audio clip from Ms. Tui in which she confirmed, I once saw a student's arm turn black and blue from being hit. When I tried to report it, the principal just said, don't make a fuss. You know this is a problem student. That program aired on Friday, and the following Monday morning, the principal of my daughter's old school submitted his early retirement request. No one forced him. No banners hung at the school gates. It was simply that, after 20 years, the silence had finally started to crack. I don't know if my daughter will remember what I did. I don't expect her to see me as some great mother. I only hope that one day if she sees someone being treated badly, she won't turn away. She won't stay silent like so many adults once did. Because I've taught her with everything in me that sometimes silence is more cruel than the act itself. And that is my story, a mother labeled a troublemaker simply because I refuse to stay silent. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who once watched her child cry every night out of fear of going to school. I once believed that speaking up was useless, but I was wrong. A single post, a handwritten letter, one person brave enough to tell the truth. Sometimes that's all it takes. If you're watching this and you were once the child who had to steel yourself just to get through the school day or the adult who swallowed injustice in silence, know that you are not alone. And if you've ever been called difficult or problematic just for protecting someone weaker, maybe, you're actually the bravest one of all.